Do you think the players will be a bit frustrated with Pep, Danny? Since we're discussing...
No.
No?
No, I think there's some mitigating circumstances. I mean, Sterling, for example, I mean, although he was too narrow for my liking, he should have got a bit more width. He plays all the time, every minute. I mean, he doesn't get rotated enough for me. I mean, he's the one player every minute seems to be on the pitch. He's inevitably going to have a dip because his form's been phenomenal for a long time. So we are being a little bit picky, but understandably, because he's now one of the best players in Europe. I think also we've got to take into consideration the amount of games the players have been playing recently in a short space of time. They both had Champions League in the week, Premier League games last weekend, Champions League the week before. And although we know that games come thick and fast, it's not an excuse for bad performance, they are more intensified than ever before. We are looking at, especially in the Liverpool side, players who are being used every week, every game at the moment because of the injury problems. So I think there's a few circumstances that have contributed to the second half. What word should we use? Disappointing game.
It's funny you should mention that, though, because I think of Manchester United yesterday. They had a great second half. They had less rest from their Champions League encounter and travelling to Turkey, and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer decided to bring that up in a very heated manner as well. Early game on a Saturday didn't seem to affect them too much in terms of the energy and the output.
Adam, one of the key things in professional football, more so today than ever, but it was creeping into the game from the sort of the late 90s, so I want to go back that far, is sports science. Now, you've got, and I'm not blaming any individual here, but just the system, because sports science controls anything those players do, be it on the training field, arguably even off the training field, preparation for games. If you've got the right sports scientist, I would argue they should be able to get teams ready and prepared for games. Leicester have been playing in Europe, and they played fresh. No one's questioning Leicester. I don't know if Brendan Rodgers has said anything publicly. It just seems that the sides aren't performing, or the sides who aren't performing are the ones that are complaining there's too many games. And Pep falls into that category. He's got one of the biggest squads. Yes, he's got injuries. I take that into consideration. But at the same time, it's not as if they've been playing Manchester United's and Arsenal's week in, week out. They've had Champions League games, which I'm just looking at the games here. Olympiacos. I mean, it was a stroll in the park, essentially. Yeah. It wouldn't have been their toughest game. So they had the opportunity to rest players. And again, that was a home game as well. So it's not even like they're having to travel. So I think sports science people have, and I say this sort of broadly, they're the ones that the managers should be looking at and saying, why aren't my players fit enough to play 90 minutes?
And Leicester played on a Thursday. They won earlier tonight, as did Spurs. And Spurs have played a whole host of more games because they had to go through the qualifiers to get into the Europa League. Why have a big squad then, Danny, for Manchester City?
Well, no, you need a big squad for the amount of games, of course. I'm not making excuses for that second half performance from City. I'm looking at reasons why. I think JMO's right. You should be preparing your players, I mean, especially the league clubs. The elite clubs have a wonderful array of talent to try and mix up, vary their selections. But I think it's a unique season and a unique, second half of last season and a unique time at the moment where the other factor as well is that in a game of football of that enormity, if you like, I think the fans can pull you through and create intensity as the game wears on. I think it's easier to let a game peter out, or without the crowd there who are getting behind you or getting on you, whichever it may be. It's a subconscious thing that you've not got that noise and that expectancy level. So I think there's lots of reasons why certain games peter out a little bit at the moment, but we shouldn't really be moaning. I think the majority of the season we've seen so far has been exciting, creative, lots of goals. I know some of the decisions and some of the new laws are reasons for that, but I think we jump on players a lot when they're not at it, but there are reasons why. It's not always them.
Injuries, though, seem to be a big concern for a lot of managers. I mentioned Manchester United. Another element of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's post-match speech, I'm going to call it a speech, was the injuries. And the most obvious one was Luke Shaw, because he went down during the game. Today, we saw Trent Alexander-Arnold go down. Is there a correlation here, JMO, between the amount of games? I mean, even for international games, they're not playing 2 in a break now, they're playing 3. That's tacking on an additional game for a 2-week period.
Yeah, well, I mean, not everyone plays in those 3 games. So with Gareth Southgate in the last break, he had essentially 2 different teams playing those games. I mean, what people are crying out for is extra substitutions or extra subs available, 5 subs like we had at the end of the last season. Now, I would argue that falls into the hands of Liverpool, Manchester City, the big sides whose strength in depth is going to be greater than the others, which I think is unfair. And yes, you can argue we don't want players getting injured. I would argue, though, and there's a lot of arguments going on here, that rather than introducing extra substitutions, which, as I say, favours the top teams, why don't they look at extending the half-time break? Because when it's muscle injuries, they are avoidable. When it's a collision injury, Van Dijk can't do anything. It doesn't matter how much break you have. What Jordan Pickford did will make you, will injure you. But when it comes to muscle injuries, the warm-up has to be a significant factor to that second half performance. So therefore, again, go back into sports science, looking into it, will 5 minutes extra? Because we wouldn't mind 20 minutes half-time. I don't think it would make too much difference. But that extra 5 minutes could be enough to stop players from getting muscle injuries.
I'm not sure that would be would that be greater though? Do you think a percentage of improvement than actually having the extra substitutions? Take away the advantage of the big clubs for a second and look at the bigger picture, which is the football supporter and the product of what we want to see as fans or as an audience worldwide is the best players on the pitch, whether that be Sheffield United's best 11 or Man City's best 11. We don't really want to be seeing Aguero out with a hamstring or De Bruyne or whoever it may be, the team that you want to watch. So although there is a little bit of there is there's credibility in that the bigger clubs would benefit. The other thing is with that is the benefit they would get would also be reduced by the fact they're playing in Europe every midweek as well. So, it kind of swings and roundabouts. And actually, do Sheffield United, Burnley, West Brom not have enough players? Now they've got 25 men in the squad. When you're defending for your life, is it? I mean, I remember at times when you're up against it and having some fresh legs to come on and help you with the defending and running around when you're chasing the ball of a team that's got good possession is great. It's a good thing.
Yeah, but Dan, my point is that, and again, I'm speaking from a sports science point of view or perspective, is that muscle injuries are avoidable. It's overstrain, load, whatever. And therefore, whether it's just a simple warm-up or whether it's because again, you can imagine that changing room at half-time today, Jurgen Klopp is going to, or anyone is going to be talking for the full allotted time about what is going to be done in that second half. And also as well, I mean, I don't know the actual setup at Manchester City, but so often you see teams in completely different areas within the stadium. Everton, for example, Manchester United have to go to the car park. So therefore, they've got an extended journey. I mean, I played at Old Trafford in Soccer Aid recently, and we had a longer walk to the pitch, not massively longer, but again, every second that you're not able to sit down and have conversation, or more importantly, every second that you're avoiding that second half recovery warm-up. Yeah, it's just an idea. Add on 5 minutes, because I think the West Brom would not be happy, and Manchester United have done it already this season, when they put on 3 super subs and completely spin a game, because they've got the talent and the depth to be able to do that.
Yeah, well, I think anything that helps, I'm not against your idea. I think anything that helps the injury crisis that players have got at the moment in terms of the numbers, they're massive, getting reduced is a good thing.
Would it be more fair as well? I know you said we're not going to discuss the advantages for a big side, but in terms of the vote, it's 11 against. All of the big 6, the so-called top 6, said yes. I think it was Chris Wilder during Project Restart who complained about it because of the game changes you have on a bench. So if I said to you, Danny, Sheffield United, name me who you think is going to play the next match, the starting 11. I would say a 90% accuracy from you. But if I said pick Manchester City's next 11, I would say you're verging more on 60 to 70% because they have so many good players who can really affect a game. This is on the presumption that everybody is fit and you have all the relevant information. You get what I mean?
Yeah, but I do, yeah. If you're Sheffield United, for example, you just use them as an example. You want your best players fit so you can try and stay in the league and have your best side available, irrelevant what anyone else is doing. The best opportunity you have to keep your best players fit with the intensity of the games, now how many games you're playing at the moment. I know they're not in Europe, Sheffield United, but cup competitions, Premier League games are more condensed because of the shorter season. They're going to suffer, like the big clubs, with muscle injuries. The numbers are there. It's not just the big six teams. So you're actually depriving yourself of the opportunity of keeping your own best players fit and worrying about your own battles in the season. You're not trying to beat Chelsea every week, or Man City. You're trying to win those games generally against the clubs around you, and you want your best players fit. So you're cutting your nose off to spite your face, really, for the odd... I mean, a lot of the times the big clubs play, let's not forget, OK, they can bring on 3 big names, but it doesn't always mean they change the game. A lot of the time it changes the rhythm and momentum. I've seen a lot of substitutes been made this season where they have a detrimental effect on the game. But there's no perfect formula for this. There's always going to be an argument against whatever anyone comes up with. The fact is that I think supporters around the world want to see the best players on the pitch. And too many, I think last weekend it was 42% rise in muscle injuries from season before. But
Danny, I mean, I don't know the data with regards to who's getting these injuries. I mean, obviously we've seen Liverpool competing in Champions League and trying to win titles. You mentioned Sheffield United. Are they suffering the same high number of injuries? Because Sheffield United's fixture list hasn't been congested like any other season. Maybe they are. Well, again, I mean, this goes beyond the volume of games because Sheffield United volume of games isn't any greater than it normally would be.
Well, they are, because the intensity of the games being played at them they're condensed from the season start point now till the end. It's short. It's the smallest season we've ever had in the Premier League, shortest.
Dan, you're a former international, so, and again, I mean, from a goalkeeping perspective, of course, I didn't have to do the physical exertion of outfield players, but top players were quite happy going away in tournaments and only having a few weeks off and going straight back into a season and playing. So
I'm not saying my opinion as a player. If I'm a player now, the more games, the better, and I'll play as many as I can.
Sorry, I keep going back to this sports science thing. There is a formula to the pre-season that they had, to the games they've got to play, and the workload in between. It just seems like there's so many sports science guys who have got it wrong for all these players to be picking up muscle injuries. If it's down to, say, contact injuries, you can't do anything about. But muscle injuries, Trent's situation, he's just gone for a sprint and all of a sudden he's pulled up. Obviously, I wasn't there. I'm not him. I don't know what the actual problem is, but it seemed like a calf injury. Yeah, and I suffered in my career from loads, towards the end of my Premier League career, that is. I suffered a lot of calf injuries. I mean, you look at the Trent thing here. Yeah, he's just doing a normal thing and he pulls up.
Could be the pitch. Could be anything. I think your point about the sports science is fair. I just think that what we're looking at is a unique, the short pre-season, the condensed fixtures, especially for a lot of the big clubs playing in Europe. I'm sure the numbers are a bit more up in the bigger clubs with the muscle injuries. But you're talking about some sports science departments being able to adapt really quickly and actually find formulas they've never had to find before.
But the other thing is, it's funny to say it, because you think of a lot of these clubs now and what their pre-season looks like. They're travelling all the way around the world. And we're not talking about 3 weeks before the season start. They'll get back the week before the season start. So they play lots of games. Granted, they're not at the intense level because they're generally against the foreign opposition, if you like. But at the same time, there's a lot of travel. There's a lot of training. There's a lot of involvement a week before the normal season starts. So as I say, I think the sports science has a big question to answer from club to club, because I'm looking at Leicester and I didn't see any problems with Leicester's performance today. There was no criticism. Manchester United is another one. There was no, even what Ollie said before the game, I don't think he said that after the game, because you could argue their performance. Oh, he did say so. Forgive me, I didn't see that.
He was fuming after the game. He made a point of it. Yeah, it's quite an interesting interview.
I've obviously watched the wrong interview then.
No, he did it before and after.
Both.
I know. I knew what he said beforehand. He was complaining about what they had to do, but then they go and beat Everton, who are one of the top teams, away from home, in a performance which didn't look like any fatigue. So
isn't it a case of the same old thing, which is when you're winning games and you're playing all right, it doesn't really, no one talks about how many games you're playing. It's when you have a couple of bad performances and a couple of injuries, you can hide behind it. Ultimately, I think the best players and the best managers adapt and get on with it. I hate seeing managers moan about games, but we're having a topic here where we're trying to find reasons as to why the numbers are so up. There's got to be something, and your point is probably a valid one. I mean, there's got to be some question marks.
Danny, can I chip in here? I don't want to seem like I'm picking on you, but I'm going through the words you said about fans around the world, from Malaysia to England to Australia to the US, wanting to see the best players on the pitch, aside best 11. But for a top 6 side, you can't say what is the best 11. That even today, I mean, the discussion this entire week has been, is it Jota or Firmino? We ran a poll online.
I'll interject because Liverpool's best team until Thiago signed and Jota signed was obvious, and every week the big games the same team always played. Man City's best team when they won the league 2 out of 3 years picked itself: Fernandinho, De Bruyne, David Silva. The front three, and then the centre half might change depending on injuries. But the best team generally, the best 11s. Okay, there's a bit more conjecture at the moment with injuries and stuff like that. But I think what I'm talking about, even if you don't think someone should play ahead of someone else, you still want to see the most creative players available to play, whether they come off the bench, whether they start the game. I don't want to see Aguero. De Bruyne's had a muscle injury this season already. Aguero's had one. Trent's got one now. I want to see Trent banging in free kicks and whipping crosses in like Beckham. I want to see De Bruyne do what he's doing today. I don't want if it means that there has to be a longer half time or there has to be 5 subs, so be it.
I agree.
Yeah, sorry.
I agree with what Danny. I mean, when you articulate it that way, I get you. When you first said it, I was sort of thinking, what do you mean? You're right. Yeah, there has to be whatever the problem is. It might not just be one thing. It's easy just to attribute it to loads of games, but as I say, when you look at Sheffield United, they're not playing these games. So why are they still picking up injuries if they are picking up the injuries? But the idea that fans in Malaysia, in India, in any part of America, they want to see a starting lineup and then arguably argue about what the best 11 should be, knowing that the best 11 was always there to be selected from, rather than forcing the positions. Liverpool have had it, haven't they, through different reasons, where they're playing youngsters because they just don't have the personnel to fill that space, even though they've got a deep squad.
But can you understand, Danny, more Chris Wilder's perspective? If my memory serves me right, it was him that commented. I look at the West Brom-Tottenham game today. So the 3 subs that were made, Diangana, Phillips and Edwards came on for West Brom. Now for Tottenham, when they were chasing the game and they scored late on, Lo Celso, Moura and Vinicius. They could bring on 3 game changers, whereas, with all due respect to the West Brom squad and their players, it's not quite of the same level. And if you can have 5 substitutes, that aids the bigger teams.
Yeah, of course. It's logical, but there's going to be some negative points in any argument. You can't. There's no perfect science to making this better to please everybody. Because if there was, we'd have done it. What the clubs have done is they've voted. And fair enough, the majority voted to go back to 3 subs because that's the way we know it, and fair enough. But now we've seen this huge increase in muscle injuries. So there's another conversation, another meeting and I think some of the clubs who aren't in the top 6, by the way, are suffering from it. And they're probably thinking, hold on, we might need to reassess this because actually we want our best players fit. Because if West Brom lose their best 3 players, or Fulham lose their best 3 players, or Burnley lose their best 3 players, for example, at the moment, they've got no chance. So it depends which perspective you want to take on it. I personally think that if you have the extra substitutions, you will reduce the muscle injuries, even if it's by 5-10%, you will. Now, okay, there's an argument to say you can still only do it in 3 segments. You can't stop starting the game. But it's got to be better than having the number 7. Last weekend, it was up to 73, I think. 78 or 73 muscle injuries.
Dan, you weren't going to substitute Trent Alexander before he pulled his calf?
No.
So having 10 more substitutes wouldn't have stopped that injury from occurring. And arguably, Trent Alexander is hardly going to miss any Premier League games. Someone like him would have the same workload, irrespective of the number of substitutes. So, and again, this is where I look at it.
But we're not talking generally about fullbacks, are we? We're talking about high impact.
But he falls into the category. He is one of the part of the statistic. And this is my point. It's kind of like rather than looking at individual teams, and the fact that you brought Sheffield United up is a very good point, because they aren't competing in Europe each week. Now, if they're suffering from injuries alongside the rest of them, then is it all sports science? Well, not all of them, because, as I say, Leicester don't seem to have that problem. And they've got the sort of player which you would attribute muscle injuries with, the likes of Jamie Vardy. You'd expect him to be pulling up every 2 minutes. So
well, he was out recently for a couple of games, and Leicester have actually done phenomenally well because they've got a lot of injuries. I mean, the whole back four was out there, like when they still won, was it last weekend, wasn't it? Or 3 of the back 4. So I think that, yes, you're right in some of those points, but the clubs outside the top 6 are getting bigger numbers, J-Mo. And the reason that if we can try and eradicate some of the reasons, and the negative of that is that the big sides on occasion get the benefit. Well, it doesn't really matter that much because the big sides are going to be the top 6 anyway. I think that if I'm playing at Fulham at the moment, I want my best players available to try and get us out to keep staying in the league. I don't want to have to keep hammering them 90 minutes. The extra couple of subs, you could argue, don't matter that much. I think the numbers are showing it does.